Hey y'all, you got Doug Gore, Dougie Doo here with Cajun Soft Wash. We're going to talk a little bit about rinsing a roof. Should you rinse? Should you not rinse? When to rinse? When not to rinse? Advantages of rinsing, disadvantages of rinsing. I'm going to try not to make this a long video, but it's probably going to end up being that way, so my apologies. So first off, is there when should you rinse? Okay, so if you have rain gutters, you really don't need to rinse or not rinse as much. If we have rain gutters, we look at where the downspouts come down at, how they come down, and that helps make the determination as to whether or not we're going to rinse. Typically, if we've got rain gutters, we don't rinse all the way up. Typically, we don't rinse all the way up on every roof anyhow, and I'll explain that in a minute. But if you have rain gutters, make sure of where those downspouts come down, how they come down, and what kind of, are they feeding plants and that kind of thing. That's going to determine the level of rinse in that area. Typically we'll put gutter bags on or gutter extenders on to get any of our sauce away from plants while we rinse. We do that obviously before we even start, so that way any full strength mix coming down. But anyhow, the other thing that you got to remember, so let's say that you don't have rain gutters, which is what we deal with most of the time. Probably 90% of our houses don't have rain gutters, at least all the way around. Very, very few have it all the way around. Even the ones that have gutters only have it on a portion. So the first and most important thing, I think, is to put down a tarping system. We use Tyvek, which many people know, but because it is the best protection for the plants, we can leave it there all day and it's not going to be a problem. When you, a couple things about all that. Before you put down your tarps, you should really, or Tyvek, you should really pre-wet all of the plants. Part of the reason there is because the roots are going to absorb the first thing they get. Okay, if the first thing they get is your sauce, your SH, then it doesn't really matter how much water you use, it's just not going to save the plant. So the best thing to do is saturate the soil if you can, and then put down your tarp, and then fill your tarp full of water, your Tyvek full of water. The reason that you do that is very simple. When you spray the roof, typically the roof is already hot from the sun. Okay, so when you put your sauce up there, the sauce is automatically superheated, and then anything that drips down is super hot. Okay, so the water already in the tarping system down below is going to help cool that instantly, and it's going to dilute it instantly. Another little tip or trick that you would want to do, if you're using your hose pipe and you're spraying water and you're working your way around the house and you run out of distance on that hose and you're going to switch to a different hose, don't shut that hose off. Turn it down so that it's slightly still running and put it on top of your tarp or your Tyvek. Allow it to just continue to run, because that's going to offer maximum dilution. It's going to help put water down everywhere. The other thing is, a lot of times when you look at where your hose pipe connects to your hose bib on the house, everybody gets that nice and tight. They don't want to see it leak, right? Wrong answer to me. Crack it open a little bit. Allow it to leak. By allowing that to spray water, it's just going to put more water down on the tarp. It's going to fill it all up. It's going to help you in the dilution process. Sometimes if we're not even connecting to a hose bib, we still turn it on and just let it run a little bit, because again, that's offering that maximum dilution. So the next side of it is, should you rinse? Again, if you're dealing with no rain gutters, you really, really should. And here's part of the reason. If you don't rinse, the morning dew sets down on the roof and then causes that to drip off. If it's the middle of summer, it's not as likely that you're going to have that problem, and the SH is no longer going to be SH. It's going to be a salt. But even the salt can be very harmful to the plants. So I encourage you to at least rinse a quarter of the way. We try to rinse at least a third of the way. But one of the things that I found, when you spray the roof, okay, depending on how thick your algae is, and I'll tell you right now, we are in one of the thickest algae belts in the nation. Okay, we get people that come down here and visit us, and they're like, "Wow, man, you guys, your roofs are terrible." Yes, they are. They're really, really bad. So we have to use more and hotter sauce, I think, than most areas. Although there's areas up there that have all the moss and everything, they've got to get pretty heavy. So One of the things about it is your SH is not always going to be SH. If you allow the sun to dry it up, and that's very important, allow the sun to dry up your mix as best as possible, because then that mix is no longer SH, it's a salt, which is less damaging than the SH is. Okay. However, the salt can be very damaging. So, like in valleys where you have valley areas, make sure that you put a tub down there to catch any full strength mix that comes down in that valley and be able to take it off. Because again, even if you dilute it, heavily dilute it, let's say you don't put a tub down, you got your tarps down, you fully saturate that corner area, that valley area with water, that's great. But if you don't capture that, what happens is all that stuff that turns to a salt then gets rinsed down and put right there in that area. Okay, all that full strength SH comes down. Even if you've diluted it, if it's got nowhere to go, it's eventually going to turn to a salt, and that can create a problem. So I encourage tubs in the corners. The other thing is, especially if it's a hot summer day, spray your roof, right? And then, especially if you're doing a house wash, afterwards, spray your roof. Once the roof dries, start spraying some water up there. Not enough to cause runoff, just enough to get the roof wet, just lightly wet. The reason being is that you're going to take and you're going to help liquefy that salt, because it's not going to be SH anymore. But if there's any SH left there, you'll be able to attach to that as well. Then the sun comes back out, dries it up again. As it's drying it up, it's evaporating. It's taking that salt and it's taking that SH away from you. Okay. If you do that 3 or 4 times, that's going to also help prevent burns on the ground or plant death on the ground. Then when you do get into the rinse phase, make sure you rinse bottom to top unless it's a valley, and I'll explain that. Rinsing bottom to top allows you to give maximum dilution, okay? We try not to rinse all the way to the very top, even on non-guttered houses. The reason being is simply because I don't want to put all of that SH and or salt directly into the ground at one time, okay? So we'll typically rinse a third to a half of the way up the roof, but we'll wet the entire roof, okay? We'll try to give that dilution, we'll try to get that sun to burn it off and those kinds of things. Again, if you try to rinse from the top to the bottom, when you put the water all the way at the top, the only thing you're doing is dragging all that chemical off and putting it directly onto the ground, okay, or onto your tarps, which then you have to dilute down there. If you start at the bottom and work your way up, you're diluting heavily, and the further up you go, any sauce that's up on that roof, as it comes down, it has to get diluted by the water that's already on there. You follow me? When you get to a valley, that's the area where we might rinse top to bottom. The reason is because we've got that tub there in that valley. We're not going to put a whole bunch of water down there. We're going to put a little bit of water, because that water is going to go up at the very top, and as it comes down, it's going to grab all of that salt and all of that, or most of it, I shouldn't say all of it. It's going to grab a lot of that salt and that leftover SH. It's going to bring it down, it's going to put it in that tub, and then we can take that tub out of there. Okay, so we're decreasing greatly the chance of having any plant damage from there. If you have rain gutters, I think I talked about this, it just depends on where they're, the location of the downspouts and all that. But I highly encourage at least misting the entire roof if you have rain gutters, misting the entire roof several times over if you don't have rain gutters before you start your actual rinse process. Rinse a third to a half of the way up. Again, that will help prevent the morning runoff, morning dew, because it has to be diluted before it gets to it. If you all have any questions about that, feel free to give me a call. Doug Gore, Dougie Doo with Cajun Soft Wash, 225-612-5988. Again, that's 225-612-5988. I appreciate y'all for listening to me, and do the best job you can for every client every time. That's extremely important. I appreciate y'all. Thanks.